What do people do when they think no one's watching? When the world believes you're gone, what secrets spill from their lips? Victor Langston, a man who clawed his way from nothing to build a global media empire, was about to find out. His life was a carefully constructed fortress: wealth, power, a perfect wife, a loyal son, a trusted friend. But fortresses have cracks, and Victor was beginning to see them. One fateful night, a car crash shattered everything. A twisted limousine, its metal crumpled like paper. A hospital bed in a sterile room. And a headline that echoed across the globe: Victor Langston in a coma. Will he ever wake up? The doctors shook their heads, their faces grim. The news anchors delivered somber reports, their voices heavy with feigned sorrow. In the boardroom of Langston Global, executives whispered about succession, their eyes gleaming with ambition. The world mourned a titan. But here's the truth they didn't know: Victor wasn't asleep. 3 days after the crash, his eyes opened in the dim light of his private hospital suite. He didn't speak. Didn't move. Didn't blink. His body lay still, tethered to machines that hummed and beeped in the quiet. But his mind was a storm, sharp, alert, and calculating. He listened to every footstep, every whisper, every breath in the room. He watched through half-closed eyes, his vision blurred but his purpose clear. Victor Langston was running a test. A test to unmask the people he'd trusted most: his wife, his son, his best friend. He'd always suspected their loyalty was fragile, like glass waiting to shatter. Now, he would see who they were when they thought he was gone. Let's see who you really are, Victor thought, his mind a coiled spring, when you believe I'm already dead. The hospital suite was a fortress within a fortress, sleek, modern, sealed behind biometric locks. Frosted glass walls reflected the glow of monitors, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. Tubes snaked from his arms, and the steady drip of an 4-mark time like a metronome. To the world, Victor was a shell, a billionaire reduced to a fading pulse. But inside, he was alive, his senses sharpened by suspicion. Doctors came with their clipboards, murmuring about brain scans and prognosis. Nurses adjusted machines, their hands efficient but detached. Visitors arrived, their footsteps echoing on the polished floor. Victor stayed still as stone, his breathing shallow, his face a mask of death. He had a theory, a dark, gnawing certainty, that those closest to him were waiting for him to die. And he was going to prove it. On the 5th day, Celine arrived. His wife of 10 years, a woman whose beauty was as calculated as her wardrobe. She glided into the room, her heels clicking like a countdown. Her silk dress rustled, and the sharp scent of her jasmine perfume cut through the sterile air. She sat by his bed, her manicured fingers brushing his hand, cool and deliberate. At first, she played the grieving wife perfectly. Her voice was soft, tremulous, a performance worthy of the cameras that followed her everywhere. "Victor, darling, you have to come back to me. Please," she said, her words dripping with sorrow. Tears fell, glistening on her flawless cheeks. But Victor knew her too well. He'd seen her rehearse emotions for media interviews, her face a canvas for whatever role the moment demanded. By day 7, the act began to fray. Late at night, when the hospital was quiet save for the hum of machines, Celine made a phone call. She stood by the window, her silhouette sharp against the city lights. Her voice, once warm and seductive, turned cold as frost. "No, I'm done waiting," she said, her tone clipped. "He's not waking up. I want the prenup shredded. He's as good as dead." Victor heard every word, each syllable a knife twisting in his chest. His heart raced, but he forced his body to remain still, his breathing steady. Inside, something fractured. The woman he'd loved, who'd stood by him through mergers and scandals, was already carving up his legacy. Her betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a declaration of war. Days later, Daniel arrived. Victor's only son, 28 and groomed to inherit the empire. Victor had spent years molding him, teaching him the ruthlessness of business, the weight of the Langston name. But Daniel entered the room with a nervous energy, his footsteps uneven. He clutched a stack of papers, his fingers twitching as he glanced at the corners of the room, searching for cameras. He thought they were off. They weren't. Victor had ensured the suite was wired, every angle recorded, every whisper captured. Daniel leaned close, his breath sour with coffee and fear. He slid a document under Victor's limp hand, the paper crinkling softly. A pen scratched across the page, deliberate and hurried. "This is for the company, Dad," Daniel muttered, his voice shaky. "You'd understand. I'm just protecting what's ours." A forged signature. A power grab. Daniel was signing away Victor's control of Langston Global, transferring authority to himself. Victor's pulse thundered in his ears, but his face remained a mask, his body betraying nothing. His son, the boy he'd raised, who'd once looked at him with awe, was stealing his life's work. The betrayal burned deeper than Celine's, a wound that cut to the bone. Then came Elliot Brooks, Victor's best friend of 30 years. His CFO, his confidant, the godfather to Daniel. Elliot had been there from the beginning, when Langston Global was just a dream scribbled on napkins in a dingy diner. He entered the room after hours, when the hospital corridors were empty. He didn't speak, didn't mourn. He sat at the bedside terminal, his fingers moving over the keyboard with surgical precision. Click. 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 Victor watched through half-closed eyes, his vision hazy but his mind razor-sharp. Numbers flashed across the screen, accounts draining, funds rerouted. $10 million, then 12, funneled into offshore shells. Elliot's face was a blank slate, his eyes cold as marble. No guilt. No hesitation. Just the quiet efficiency of a man who'd planned this for years. Victor's chest burned with rage, his fists itching to clench, but he stayed still. His brother in all but blood was a thief, siphoning the empire they'd built together. The betrayal was a poison, seeping into every memory they'd shared. But not everyone turned on him. Maya, Victor's assistant of 12 years, came every day. She brought no lawyers, no hidden agendas. Just herself. Her presence was a quiet warmth in the cold room, her footsteps soft, her breathing steady. She carried a faded photo. A snapshot of Victor and his first wife, Anna, laughing in a cramped apartment, back when he was just a dreamer with nothing but ambition. Maya sat by his bed, her dark hair falling over her face as she studied the photo. She didn't speak at first, her silence heavy with unspoken grief. Then, her voice broke. "They're circling like vultures, Victor," she said, her words trembling. "Your family, your friends, they're tearing you apart. But I'm here. I'll always be here." A tear slipped down Victor's cheek, hot and unstoppable. He couldn't hold it back. Maya saw it, her breath catching in her throat. "You're awake, aren't you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. She reached for the nurse's call button, her hand trembling. Then she stopped. Her loyalty, her faith in him, held her back. She stayed silent, her eyes locked on his, a silent pact forming between them. Victor knew then, one person was true. The days bled together, each visitor peeling back another layer of deception. Celine returned, her visits briefer, her words sharper. She spoke of redecorating the penthouse, of new investments, as if Victor's absence was already a fact. Daniel grew bolder, bringing board members to the hospital, discussing restructuring plans in hushed tones by his bedside. Elliot's late-night visits continued, each transfer larger, his confidence growing as Victor's coma stretched on. But on the 10th night, danger came. The door hissed open, and a figure slipped into the room, cloaked in shadow. Hood up, gloves on, their movements silent as a predator's. A syringe gleamed in their hand, catching the dim light. They approached Victor's foreline, their fingers steady, precise. Death was inches away. Victor's eyes snapped open, his gaze locking onto the figures. Time stopped. The air thickened with tension, the silence screaming. The figure froze, their hand trembling. Then alarms blared, piercing the quiet. The syringe clattered to the floor. Security burst in, their boots pounding. The figure fled, vanishing into the night like smoke. Victor's heart hammered, but he forced himself to stay still until the guards left. He checked the visitor log later, when the nurses were distracted. One name stood out, scrawled in elegant script, Celine. The attempt on his life was the final piece. Victor's test was complete, and the results were a gallery of betrayal. Celine wanted his fortune. Daniel wanted his power. Elliot wanted his wealth. Only Maya wanted him, the man, not the empire. But Victor wasn't ready to reveal himself yet. He needed one more act, one final stroke to turn the tables. He waited 2 more days, letting the hospital routine lull his betrayers into complacency. Celine visited again, her face a mask of false concern as she spoke to a lawyer on the phone. Daniel brought more documents, his signatures growing sloppier, his arrogance palpable. Elliot's transfers slowed, as if he sensed the end was near. Maya, though, remained constant, her visits a quiet ritual of loyalty. She brought the photo each time, her fingers tracing the edges as she whispered stories of Victor's early days, moments of struggle and triumph that no one else remembered. On the 12th morning, Victor Langston woke up. The doctors gasped, their clipboards forgotten. Nurses scrambled, their voices overlapping in disbelief. Reporters swarmed the hospital, cameras flashing, headlines already forming. The world called it a miracle, a triumph of the human spirit. But Victor called it something else. Judgment Day. He returned to Langston Manor, his body frail but his presence commanding. The grand hall was a cathedral of marble and glass, its chandeliers casting light like a spotlight on a stage. He summoned them all, Celine, Daniel, Elliot, and Maya. They arrived one by one, their faces a mix of shock, guilt, and forced relief. Victor sat in a wheelchair, his gaunt frame draped in a tailored suit, his eyes burning with the weight of what he'd seen. "I wasn't asleep," he said, his voice low and venomous. "I heard you. I saw you. I know who you became when you thought I was gone." He turned to Celine first, her beauty now a hollow shell. He pressed a button, and her voice filled the room, cold and clear, "I want the prenup shredded. He's as good as dead." Celine's face drained of color, her lips parting in a silent protest. "You married my money, not me," Victor said. "Divorce papers are waiting. Sign them and leave." She staggered back, her heels unsteady, but said nothing. There was no defense. To Daniel, Victor held up the forged documents, their ink a testament to betrayal. "You wanted my empire," he said. "You get nothing. You're done." Daniel's face crumpled, his hands shaking. He opened his mouth to speak, but Victor's glare silenced him. To Elliot, Victor said nothing. He simply nodded. Police stepped forward, their uniforms stark against the opulent room. They held a USB drive, bank logs, dates, transfers. Betrayal in numbers, undeniable and damning. Elliot's shoulders slumped, his eyes avoiding Victor's. Handcuffs clicked shut, the sound echoing like a gavel. Then Victor turned to Maya, who stood at the edge of the group, her hands clasped tightly. His face softened, the hardness in his eyes giving way to something warmer. "You cried for me," he said. "You remembered the man I was before all this. You stayed." He handed her a key, symbolic, heavy with meaning. It gleamed in the light, a promise and a burden. "Langston Global is yours now," he said. "Let it well." Maya's eyes widened, her breath catching. She nodded, her fingers closing around the key, her loyalty rewarded in a way she'd never expected.